Hello, hey everyone, welcome back to my channel Ethical Cruise. Today in this video, I will talk about AWS IAM. So this is a third video in this cloud computing series, and in my previous video, I already discussed about concepts around what is cloud computing, different type of cloud computing, cloud deployment models, cloud providers, and all. Also, we talked about a little bit about AWS, Amazon Web Service, about its infrastructure, its region, about its availability zone, AWS Management Console, and also about AWS Shared Responsibility Model. The You will find a description of these videos in the description below, as well as you can find a link in the I button on the top right. Okay. So in this today's video, I'll cover more around this AWS IAM, and we will talk about what IAM is, IAM authentication, IAM authorization, AWS groups. Okay. So let's start. Okay, so first of all, what is AWS IAM? Means the identity and access management. Okay, so everything is being provided as a part of web service in AWS. Okay, so IAM is also a web service that Amazon provides that helps us basically to secure our account. Okay, it helps us to secure and control the access of Amazon services as well as the resources. Also, IAM is used to control who is authenticated, signed in, and authorized, has permissions to use resources. So, at a time of when we are signing in, IAM is the one who checks it basically if the correct user is getting signed in or not, whether it is a root user or an IAM user or anyone. So, it basically checks for the authentication of that user. And once the user is authenticated, user or system, if that is authenticated, then it checks for its permission, whether that particular uh, entity which is authenticated is allowed to access those resources or not. Okay, so IAM is also a global service because IAM is needed as a part of checking authorization or authentication before using any service. So that's a global service and does not specific to any reason, so you can use it from anywhere. Okay, and also when you first create any user on AWS, the first time when you create your account at the time of registration, the user which gets created is called a root user. Okay, and that root user is like an admin user which is having all the admin privileges and can access all the services and resources. Okay, and IAM feature is offered by AWS free of cost so that we can basically maintain the security of the AWS services and resources. As you remember, AWS has a shared responsibility model. So security of the resources and services is like a shared responsibility of both AWS as well as the user which we are using. Okay, and also using IAM, you can create and manage AWS users also. So after login via root account, you can create as many users as you want, and also you can create several groups, and then you can group different users into those particular groups and can allow uh, those users, those groups to access any AWS resources by defining the permissions to them. Okay, so this is overall what identity and access management is and what it's tried to do. It's basically in a nutshell, it's tried to check for authentication and as well as for authorization. Okay, coming to next, the second one is AWS authentication. So what do we mean by authentication first of all? So if you know, authentication means when to check basically who you are. Okay, if to check whether the one you are saying, to identify you are the one who is actually who can access the resources. Okay, so let's suppose if I am logging into any of my account, and so they needs a username password to check for that if I am the one, if I'm currently logging into this or not. Also, if I'm having a multi-factor authentication enabled, then I can have also the OTP, and on the basis of that, they can identify whether the correct user is getting signed in or not. Okay, and AWS services and resources can be accessed using three ways. The first one is AWS Management Console. So we already talked about AWS Management Consoles in my last video. You can check that video out. And also there are two ways by which we can access the AWS services and resources. First, this is AWS CLI. So this is command line interface. We'll talk about this in detail in the upcoming videos. And also we can access the AWS services also uses SDKs or API. So this is basically being used at the time of programmatically development. So the programs and applications can use the service and resources. And as a user, we do not need to authenticate and to do everything on their behalf. Services can also, this application can also access the resources. So though for that also they will be needing authorization, because not every service, not every application can access every service. So for that also we will need some particular permissions. Okay, so these are the three ways by which any service or resources can be accessed. Okay, and before using any of the services, first of all, they have to be authenticated. Okay, so AWS Management Console provides you a web-based way to access the AWS resources, as we already saw in the previous video. So once you will basically log in by using your username, password, and all. So after that, you will come to this particular home window, that is like a home window of Management Console. Okay, so for that, you will be needing a username password combination. And if the multi-factor authentication is enabled, then you will also need that part. And if it is not, then you can directly log in by using username password combination. But it is generally recommended to enable multi-factor authentication whether you are using any type of user. Okay, because the multi-factor authentication provides you more security, because if anyone is having your password or username, but in that case they also, in that case also they will be needing a authentication token to authenticate themselves. Okay, and in terms of CLI or SDK APIs, they do not need username and password combination, but they need an access key and secret key. Okay, so this is just a dummy snapshot of this access key and access key ID and access key. You cannot access any account using this. These are the dummy ones, and these access key and ID can be created optionally through AWS Management Console. When we basically log into Management Console and create an IAM user or services roles, then we can also create the access keys for that. Okay, so these s- users or users or resources and the application can access this AWS resources servicing using those access key and secret keys. Okay, next come the AWS user group. Okay, so you know, uh, to access any AWS resources and services, we need users to have different permissions, which we call as authorization. So what if any user is authorized to access any resources? Let's suppose I take an example of EC2 instance or S3 bucket. So if a particular user, let's suppose user Alice, if it is user Alice is authorized to access EC2 instance, then if we provide permission to Alice, then only he will be able to access that particular resource. But if we do not provide any permission to Bob, then Bob will be able to authenticate itself by you entering the credentials or through CLI method. But still, Bob will not be able to access EC2 instance or S3 bucket because Bob is not having the permissions. Okay, so we can give permissions at the user level, or also what we can do, we can create a group basically of a similar type of users, and then we can provide permissions at a group level. Okay, so and what is, so this group is what we call as a group of users. Okay, so IAM users group. Okay, user group is a collection of IAM users. Okay, and we can define specify permission for multiple users so that it will make it easier, because what we will do, instead of providing permissions to every user, let's suppose when we started our team, we are having only Alice in our developers team. Okay, but let's suppose after some time Bob also joins the team, and after some time Charles also joined the team. So if every time someone is joining or someone is leaving the team, if we provide the permission at a user level, then it will be a tedious task to maintain permissions for them. So as a workaround, what we can do, which is usable, like we can assign permission to as a group level. So like we have defined permission, like this is a developer group. Okay, so we can assign permission to developer group, and whosoever will be part of the group will be having those permissions which a developer group is having. Okay, so since currently Alice, Bob, Charles, all of these are the part of this developer group, so whatever permission this developer group is having, all these three users will also have the same permission. Okay, similarly, there is another group, audit team. So Charles is a member of this audit team and David is also a member of this audit team. So whatever permission this audit team group is having, Charles and David will also have this same permission. And if you take an example of this operations group, David and Edward is part of this particular user group. So this operations group, whatever permission this user operation group is having, same permissions David and Edward will also have. Okay. And as you can see, Fred is not part of this any of the group. So Fred is like an individual user. So whatever permissions we want, we can provide an individual permission to this Fred. Okay. And also one thing to note is that some important parts. So one user group can contain many users. So a group can contain many users, but in similar manner, a user can be belong to multiple groups. Like here you can see Charles is part of a developer group as well as Charles is a part of audit team group. So Charles is having permission of developer group as well as the permission of audit team. Okay, so it will be having permission of both. But user groups cannot be nested one, means one user group cannot belong to any other user group. Okay, and also user do not need to be part of any group mandatory. Users can be individual also. Okay, so this was around the AWS user groups. Next, we'll talk about AWS authorization. So after a user or system has been authenticated, they needs to have the proper authorization to access an AWS resources, because only on the basis of that we will be able to determine if they are allowed to access that resource or not. Okay, so authorization is like a second step which comes after authentications. If authentication itself failed, then an authorization will not come into picture. But once the user is authenticated, then the next step is to determine whether that user or system or anything can access AWS resources or not. Okay, and permissions are generally assigned to a three type of entities. One is user, group, or a role, and this is done through a policy document which lists, which explicitly lists all the permissions which either user, group, or role can follow through. Okay, so what is this? This policy is like a JSON document, and this policy document which we are talking about is like a JSON document. And this JSON document, we are listing the permissions where what that group, user, and role can follow. Okay, and then these permissions are basically assigned to this user, this group, or the IAM role. We'll talk about more about how this policy document is being created, what's the structure of that in a later in some next videos. Okay, so let's see how we can create a IAM user, how we can create a groups and all, and then we will see how we can access those. Okay, so let's go to that. Okay, so this is AWS Management Console. We will log into that once we are clicking it. So it will take us to this page, and then we are going to sign in. So once we will come to the sign in page, you will notice there are two type of user through which we can sign in. One is the root user and second one is IAM user. So as I told you, a root user is the user which is the first user which is being created with our account. Okay, and after login with the root user, then we can create as many as IAM users which we want. So first of all, what I'll do, I'll log in with to this root user and will come to the console homepage. So after logging in, this is a console homepage, which we already talked about how it look like, what all things which we can do in this in our previous video already. So you can check that out video. Okay. So first of all, what I'll do, we will go to this IAM. We will search IAM from here. Click on this IAM. See, here there is no, if we click on this users, so as of now, there is no user which is present. Root user is the only user which can access this account. If we check into these groups, there are some user group which are already created. We can ignore that group or we can also delete those we want. We can delete them. Okay, so what we can do, just go to users. We will create a, what we will do, we will create a new IAM user first. Okay, so go to this users part, we'll create add user. Then we can give any name. Let's suppose we are giving name as Charles. Okay, now Credentials type, we have two ways how we can produce our credentials. Like first one is access key, programmatic access. So as I told you, like this keys are needed when we have to log in via API, CLI, SDK. Means if we have to log into account using this, for that we will be needing these programmatic keys. But if we want to log into a management console, then we will be basically using needing a password combination. So for now, I'll clicking this password combination. Okay, and also after clicking on this password, AWS provides an option either to auto generate password or to create a custom password. Okay, so I am selecting the custom password option now. Also, as a security measure, if you want to reset your password after login, so you can select this checkbox. Okay, so what it will do, user must create a new password at next sign in. So whenever we will be signing it next, it will ask us to reset our password. So I am not selecting this checkbox as of now. Okay, so I am just clicking on this next permission. Okay, then I'll come to this page. Then I'm having the permission. So as I told you, we can assign permission to user in two manners. Either we can assign permission to a group and then we can assign that user to that particular group, or we can assign permission to the user directly. Okay, so let's do this first of all. Let's assign the permission to any user directly. So it will not be part of any user group. Okay, so what we will do, let's select this first administrator access, click on next. This is an optional part. I am skipping this. Here you can review whatever you have done. So your username is Charles. Your access type is this that I have selected a password. Console password type is custom because I'm already setting my password by myself. Password is set. I've selected no. And manage policy. I've selected this particular policy. Then I'm clicking on create user. Okay. So here you can see that my user is created. Now click on close and it will take us to users. Now you can see that user Charles is created. Total one user is present here. This is an IAM user. Okay. It does not belong to any group. That's why here it is none. We do not have any multi-factor authentication as of now. That's why it is showing as none. Okay. And since we do not have any access key for this particular user, so that's why access key is also saying as none. Okay. Now let's create one more user, and this time we will assign it to a group. Okay. Let's create another user, call it Bob. I'll do the same thing here. First of all, I'm selecting a password base, then I'm generating my password, custom password, and then I'm deselecting it that I do not require password reset at the next login. So clicking on next permission. Now I will add it to a group. Since there is no group which is present already, what it will do, it will give us this permission that we can create a group. So what I will do, I will create a group first. What I will do, I will, let's say, we call this group as a developer group. So I'll call this developer group and we can assign any permission to this. Uh, let's say I provide this permission for now. That is grants full access for Alex sub-business source and access to related AWS services. Create group. Okay. So now this particular user Bob is assigned to a developer group and developer group is having this particular permission. Okay. Now we can click on next. Again, this is an optional part. I'm leaving this. So here you will see a summary like username is Bob, access type is with a password, console password is custom, password is set no, and this time permission summary that is belongs to a group and group name is developer. Okay, then we can create a group. Okay, it is created. Click on close. Now here you can see since I have created one more users, the users count has been increased to 2. Okay, and now for this user group, since it is belongs to a developer group, here we I can see our developer group name is here. Okay, and also since we do not have any multi-factor authentication for this as of now, it is showing as none, and also the access key, it is showing as none here. Okay, now let's go to user groups because we have created one user developer group here. Let's see this. So once I click into this developer group, I can see like this group is showing as user group one, and this having only one developer group. The users permissions of this are still loading. As we can see, creation time of it is 1 minute ago. Okay, just go into details of this. As you can see, once I go into this details, it is showing one user, which user belongs to this particular user group. So that is Bob. What are the permissions of this? We can see this is a Alexa for business full access. That is the only permission which I provided. Okay, now let's do one more thing. Create one more group. Let's say it operation. Okay, and now we can provide any permission. Let's suppose I am read only access. So we have created a group operation. Create one more user, and we will assign that user to this particular operation. Click on users, add users, username Marley, creating a custom password, and not do not want to reset my password at the login. So I'm just selecting that, clicking on permission. Now here, since groups already present, then it is giving us a list of groups. Two groups are present, so I'm selecting this one. Okay, so it will be as a part of this. As a this tag is optional, so I am skipping this. And here we can see the review. Like this particular username is Marley. It is password based. I am custom based password generation selected. Password reset is no, and the group is no. So I'm creating it user. Okay, so once you are done, that you can see. So here you can see now we have three type of users. Here you can see now that we have three type of users: Bob, Charles, and Marley. Two of them belongs to a group, but Charles does not belong to any group. None of them is having multi-factor authentication. Also, none of them is having any access key. Okay. Now we will what we will do? We will log in with this particular IAM user. Okay. Let's suppose we log in with this Charles user first. Before logging into Charles, before any of the IAM, before login to AWS Management Console with any of the IAM user, we need the account name. Okay, so first for to getting the account name, just go to dashboard first. You will see an account alias here. Okay, so once you will select this, see this, there is an alias which is there, that is ethical cruise. Okay, that so what we can do, either we can directly log in using this particular URL because this URL is already containing the alias name, or at the time of login we will have to provide this alias name. Okay, we can edit this alias name as many time as we want. Okay, so for now let's try to log in with the particular IAM user Charles which we created by using this. Okay, so I'm opening it into another browser to compare both the root user as well as the IAM user. Okay, so this is a login window. What we will do now this time, instead of login with root user, we will log in with an IAM user. So what I will do, I'll select this IAM user. Now it needs the account ID 12 digits or account alias. So I have already have the alias. Okay, so now I have logged in into this particular user. Now if you come here, you can see the details. This is IAM user is Charles. Okay, and as you can see, this root user has multi-factor authentication enabled, but this particular user from which I am logged in is not having a multi-factor authentication. Okay, now if I'll go to under this users, since this user was having administrative access, that's why it is able to see all the details. If I click on this Charles, And see here, this is administrative access. Okay, now go back to this user. Now what I'll do, do one thing. Let's remove the permission of this particular Charles group, this Charles user. Okay, let's go back to root user and remove the permission of this Charles. So I'm removing the permission of administrator access from this Charles user. So I'm detaching it. Okay, so this particular user is not having any permission now. Now I'm going back to that particular IAM user. Now do refresh. And here you can see that this particular user, since this particular user does not have any permission, that's why it cannot see any user group and all, because this user is not having any permission. Okay, since we removed only admin permission which we provided to that user. Now let's do one more thing. Let's provide a read only access to this particular user, and then we will see how if we can create a group or any new user into that from this user or not. So let's go back to the root user. Again, I'm going to this Charles user. I'm assigning permission. I am read only access. Okay, now this user is having I am read only access, means it can only read the number of users and all what the details are. It cannot do anything else. So let's go back to this Charles user now, this I am user. Okay, I'm refreshing it again. And as you can see, now we can again see the information around the number of users which are present here. If I go to users group and see, I can also see the information that the developer group and operation group is present. Now let's try to create a group from here. Group created by Charles. Let's assign this permission for now. Create group. And here you can see we cannot create a group because this user Charles is not authorized to perform this particular group, because has no identity based policy allows the creation group, because we didn't provide the right access to this particular group. We only provide the IAM access read only permission to this. So these are the things which we can manage. So by using IAM, we can manage all these permissions at a root user, at the user level, at the group level, at similarly at the role level, at a granular level. So by this, we can either deny or we can allow access to any of this permission, allow any of access to any of the resources at any time. Okay. So yeah, that's all in today's video. In the next few videos, we will learn about AWS in some more details. I'll talk about this AWS IAM, some more things like how the policy structure is always created, what is the roles and all, and we will talk about that in detail. Okay, so please do like the video, share this video with your friends and colleagues, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel, Ethical Cruise. Also, you can visit my blogging website ethicalcruise.com, where you can read about the security basics, footprinting and reconnaissance, and also about this cloud computing and AWS things. Okay, all. So I will see you all in the next video to continue with this cloud computing series. Thank you. Bye.